What's up guys, Hoop Break here. Before I start this banger of a video, be sure to follow me on Instagram, which should be somewhere over there. There I post in-depth analysis and prediction of different teams in the bubble. We're working our way up. Right now we're on the Clippers. We're going to be talking about the Bucks and Lakers soon. So follow me on there. Also like, comment, subscribe.
All that stuff that other YouTubers tell you to do because, helps the algorithm. I'm on more people's recommended and stuff with that.
So be sure to do all that. And honestly, let's get right into this. Okay, today we're going to be talking about the Celtics and Raptors second round series that is coming up. I think it starts in a couple days. There's a little boycott. I think it's starting Sunday. Yeah, this is going to be one for the books, and here's why. First, let's talk about how each of these teams have fared in the playoffs so far, which is both teams did a great job of taking care of business and sweeping in the first round. The Raptors did a great job of making it so the inferior Nets had no shot against them. None of the games were even that close. But I'm honestly especially impressed with the Celtics. They swept a Sixers team that's still decent even without Simmons, and they still had the rest of their core playing. And another thing that not many people are talking about is that Walker looked super comfortable in the Celtics offense. And I haven't seen that at all this season. So finally seeing him mesh with the rest of their core is really, really good for the Celtics. Okay, so you cannot talk about the Raptors without mentioning their next man up mentality. And the definition, I'd say, of the next man up mentality is that players trust each other to make and take good shots. So, for example, Stanley Johnson was trusted with hitting a bubble game winner against the Sixers, which he did. And the Raptors bench put up 100 points in their closeout game against Brooklyn. Sure, they don't have a superstar that the team depends on in late game scenarios, but instead they have good role players that pass and have great movement off ball until an open man has a good shot. And this is why the Raptors rank first in close game win percentage. Another thing about the Raptors is that they are deep. They have plenty of players that can drop a cool 20 points on any given night. I think they're the deepest team in the league besides the Clippers. In the first round, Van Vliet, Siakam, Powell, Ibaka, and Lowry all had at least one game with 20 plus points. Norman Powell has really impressed me, and he's been especially productive as of late. He comes off the bench, averages 18 points per game on well over 50% from the field in the first round so far. They are averaging by far the most bench points in the playoffs as well so far. The Celtics are third to last in bench points. In fact, the Celtics are running pretty thin, especially without Hayward. Their most notable bench players since Hayward's injury have been Brad Wanamaker, Enes Kanter, Semi Ojeleye, and Grant Williams.
I don't know about you, but that sounds like a pretty crappy bench to me.
In contrast to the Celtics' very mediocre bench, the Raptors have Serge Ibaka, Norman Powell, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, and Terrence Davis coming off their bench. Now you see the problem. None of the Celtics bench players can kickstart an offense or even give substantial offensive production, whereas all of those Raptors players that I mentioned earlier can do so. This hasn't been a problem yet, for the Celtics only took 4 games to eliminate the Sixers. However, in a 7-game series, the Celtics core will start to deteriorate and get tired from playing so many games, whereas the Raptors will be well rested. Another thing is that at this point, I really do trust Kyle Lowry as a veteran leader. He's where the next man up mentality starts, because even though he's the Raptors' best player, he trusts their younger guys and their decision making. Lowry also puts his body on the line every single play and leads the Raptors' scrappy defense. If there's any doubt as to if he's good in the clutch, let me dispel it. This season, Kyle Lowry has been 47% from the field and 43% from 3 in the clutch. His total clutch net rating is a solid plus 19.3. In the Sixers-Celtics series, if there's one thing that the Celtics really struggled with, it was definitely guarding Joel Embiid. Theis played decent defense, but Embiid still averaged 30 points and 12 rebounds per game. Although the Raptors don't have a big man as dominant as Embiid, they'll have to deal with a trio of Siakam, Ibaka, and Gasol, all of which are important and productive pieces on the Raptors. To prevent them from going off, Boston will need to make sure that their forwards like Tatum and Brown help on Toronto's bigs, because Theis can only do so much. They need to especially try to deny entry passes to Toronto's bigs around the post and discourage post touches. Okay, so as you guys know, the Raptors are great on defense and rank second in defensive rating. They're especially good at defending the paint thanks to their interior trio of Siakam, Ibaka, and Gasol, which just lock up opposing bigs. Most notably, they severely limited Giannis Antetokounmpo in last year's playoffs, which allowed them to win the series and eventually the championship. And although the Celtics core is very good on defense, they're also very young, and they need to be aware of this and adjust their play styles accordingly. Instead of driving in for contested layups, the Celtics need to take advantage of having bigger, slower guys on them and work for open looks from the mid-range and three. I see Walker, Tatum, and Brown pulling up from the mid-range and shooting floaters instead of taking it all the way to the hole. Alright, now let's talk about where Boston excels. Similar to Toronto, Boston has a great defense. They rank 4th in defensive rating. However, unlike Toronto, their defense is best on the perimeter. Smart can lock down opposing guards, whereas Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are really good against wings. Smart, Tatum, Brown, and even Grant Williams are all super versatile defenders. They can all guard multiple positions and do it well. This gives them mobility on switches, and it makes it super difficult for opponent offenses to exploit. Just to illustrate the Celtics switchability, let me run you through a quick example. Let's say you're guarded by Marcus Smart and he's hounding you. You finally get a good screen set by Dice or whatever, and you get off the screen, you turn the corner just to have Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown on you. That's a reality for many teams, and honestly, the Clippers are the only other team that have 2 stars that can guard any non-center. The Raptors shouldn't really worry about who they're matching up with in mismatches, and instead focus on maintaining ball movement and staying true to their morals. Another thing about the Celtics is their inside defense is also pretty solid. Dice does a good job of protecting the paint, especially when Tatum and Brown are helping him out. The Celtics give up the 5th least points in the paint in the league. Another thing about the Celtics is they could really give the Raptors trouble scoring. The biggest thing that the Raptors are missing is a Lou Williams, Jordan Clarkson type of guy who can just come in, put up a few quick buckets, and get the offense back in a rhythm. If the Celtics lock up the Raptors guards, I could see the Raptors having multiple games where they put up less than 100 points. No matter the situation, the Raptors can't give up their ideology and mentality of moving the ball as much as possible and trusting their teammates. Once the Raptors start calling ISOs, games will slip out of their hands quick. Another thing where the Celtics could really capitalize is on the Raptors' sloppiness. The Raptors are in the bottom half of the league in turnovers, and the Celtics are top 10 in steals. If the Celtics are persistently pesky, they could score a lot of easy buckets off turnovers and take over games quick. The Raptors are also sloppy on the offensive boards and give up the 5th most second chance points in the league. Brown and Tatum could cash in on easy buckets if they just crash the boards and follow their shots. Jason Tatum is also quite honestly the real deal. I wouldn't say he's a superstar quite yet, but he's made some serious strides in his game this year, and he did not slow down once the playoffs came around. In the series versus the Sixers, he averaged 27 points per game, 10 rebounds per game on decent shooting splits. Another underrated part of his game is how well he protects the ball. On the season, he averaged only 2 turnovers per game, which is not much for someone with his production and how much he has the ball in his hands. He also only turned it over 3 total times in the Sixers series. And as I previously mentioned, he's not to be messed with on defense. Another place where the Celtics trump the Raptors is star power, and there's no question about that. The Raptors have no one that could single-handedly take over a game, whereas the Celtics have 2 guys in Kemba Walker and Jason Tatum that can do so. This makes it harder for the Raptors to come back from big deficits. If the Celtics' ball movement is stagnant, I trust multiple guys to still put up an ISO bucket. However, I don't trust anyone on the Raptors in the same situation. I don't trust Van Vliet, Lowry, Norman Powell. I trust those guys if the ball is moving and they're having open shots, but I don't trust them in the ISO like I trust Tatum. And before I get into my final thoughts, there's one thing that I'd really like to stress. If there's one thing that the Raptors need to do in this series is do not let the ball stagnate. Keep ball movement going, set off-ball screens, and just make sure even if the shots aren't going in, sometimes shots won't go in. As long as the ball is moving, shots will eventually go in. All right, now on to my final thoughts. I honestly think this series is going to be absolutely spectacular. I cannot wait to watch 2 defensive powerhouses go at it. I wouldn't be surprised if there are games where neither team breaks 100 points. However, what did the Raptors have last year? How did they go to the championship last year? They had depth and a culture of grit and trust and the next man up mentality, and I think that's something they still have. And although they lost Kawhi, I think Norman Powell was a very underrated and great consolation prize, which I think will be enough to take them to the Eastern Conference Finals this year. Raptors in 7.